Section 2. You will hear two students talking about a seminar paper that one of them is going to give. Before you start listening, you have 30 seconds to look at questions 11 to 15. Hey, did you see that show on TV last night about people downloading music from the internet?
No, I was busy with my research into students cheating at university.
What do you mean by cheating?
Plagiarism.
What's that?
Basically, it's when you use someone else's ideas or work and pretend it's your own work. There's nothing wrong with using other people's ideas or research, but you have to say where you got the ideas or information. There was a famous case last year of a university dean who had to resign when it came out that in a few books he'd written over 20 years ago, there were some instances of plagiarism.
Oh yeah, I remember hearing about that. I thought they were being a bit tough on him. I mean, it was a long time ago.
Well, it's a pretty serious thing to do in academic circles. It's intellectual theft. It's nothing new, but it seems to have become much more common recently.
How can you tell?
Oh, a few surveys have been done on it. One survey in the US found that back in 1969, 58% of school students let others copy their work, but this had risen to 97% in 1989.
It's that bad, isn't it? Well, anyway, you know what school kids are like.
Well, the trouble is, it doesn't stop there. They take their bad habits with them when they go on to uni. A more recent survey in another country showed that more cheating happens now among undergraduate students than high school students.
That's disappointing.
Yeah, there are even instances of postgraduate students doing it, though it involves a much smaller proportion of them.
So why is more cheating happening now?
Well, the internet has made it easier. You can use a search engine to find what you need to know, then cut and paste. Before the internet, you had to go to books and copy the information by hand, so it took a lot longer. Students often used to write their essays by hand too.
Yeah, I don't do much writing anymore, but I do plenty of typing.
Well, your handwriting is pretty terrible, so that's probably not a bad thing. Anyway, what it really comes down to is that the internet is so huge. There are just so many more sources than there used to be. In the older days, if a teacher thought a student had cheated, they could look up the relevant book to check. The internet is far too big for that. I know teachers are always complaining about being too busy, but it's beyond the capacity of anyone to have an overview of the internet.
Yeah, there are billions of pages out there. So does that mean it's impossible to stop it?
Not exactly. There is this new software program being used now to check the work of almost 5 million students in about 60 countries. They find that there's a plagiarism rate of about 30%.
Is it expensive?
No, it only comes to about 50 cents a student.
You now have 30 seconds to look at questions 16 to 20. So, how does this computer program work?
Well, when a student hands in a paper, they also have to submit it electronically. This is then compared to other essays and to a database of journals and of all the material that's on the internet.
What about if the students copied from books?
No, it only covers electronic material. The program then underlines any phrase, paragraph, or page that's been copied from an electronic source, and this information is given to the teacher. It analyses around 10,000 term papers a day. It's in operation in all universities in Britain, but only at some of the big ones in the United States.
And what happens if they find that a student's cheated?
Well, in extreme cases, the student can be expelled from the uni. But expulsion can take a long time and give the uni bad publicity, so it doesn't happen much. An alternative is for the student to be failed for the whole course, but usually they just fail that paper.
Yeah, I've never heard of anyone being expelled for cheating.
Oh, it does happen, but you don't always hear about it. You know, the student involved's embarrassed, and the uni wants to protect its reputation.
And what else can be done to reduce the amount of plagiarizing happening?
Well, now some unis are putting less emphasis on papers done during term and going back to written exams, where there's much less chance of cheating.
Oh, like those tests we used to do in high school. All that tension and watching the clock.
Yeah. They thought about introducing oral exams, but they'd be too time-consuming and expensive for undergraduate courses. Generally, unis take the attitude that prevention's better than cure, so they explain to students what plagiarism is and how to avoid it. That's the long-term solution. Anyway, it's not always easy to show for sure that someone's committed plagiarism in an essay.
Even with this new software?
That's right.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 2.
You will hear an interview about canoeing. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Have you imagined paddling on a river in a small boat? Canoes, which are narrow boats and usually hold 1 or 2 people at the most, are particularly well known for being unstable and turning over in the water. But more and more people enjoy this dangerous sport. Today, Cynthia Bocchi, an adult education teacher and an addict of canoeing as well, will share her experience of canoeing with us. Cynthia, when did you begin this sport?
Well, I started it 6 or 7 years ago, and soon I got attracted by the exercise. I have to admit that it brings me great fun. It has become part of life.
So, could you describe how you do it?
At first, I think you need some like-minded friends. The friends who share the same interest with you. It's no fun at all if you canoe alone. Usually, we assemble in a parking shelter near Island Lake Recreation Area. We pull our canoes from inside vans, lift them from atop cars and trucks by employing wheels to help transport them to the shores of the lake.
What equipment do you need for the sport?
Well, first and foremost, a canoe, of course. The price ranges from £300 to £700, depending on the material they're made of. The more you pay, the better you'll get. Personally, I wouldn't look at anything under £500, but that obviously depends on your budget. You also need a hard helmet to protect yourself against rocks when you fall out of the canoe, and believe me, that is very likely to happen. Because of this, it's a must for a beginner to wear a wetsuit. Oh, bathing suits don't work really. Sometimes a life jacket is a necessity in case you fall into the water and no one else is nearby. Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen carefully and answer questions 16 to 20.
Maybe many can't understand your passion for the dangerous sport. Do you think it's all worth it?
Absolutely! I just love it. It's exciting, it's exhilarating, yet it's peaceful and it's calm. You can canoe as hard as you want to, or you can take it easy. In addition to having fun, canoeing offers a workout without realizing you're working out. Besides being a great exercise, which is good for your heart and lungs, you gain strength and mobility. You build strength not only by paddling, but also from lifting and carrying your canoes and exercise your mobility. Frankly, I never had upper body strength until I started canoeing. Now I can pick my canoe up and carry it on my shoulder with no problem. However, it's not just a workout of upper body, but also a total body workout if you're doing it correctly. It's a great calorie burner. And more important to me, paddling isn't strictly about exercise. It's as much about the peace and the relaxation that comes from being out on the water. I saw it described on a brochure as liquid medicine for the soul, and that is so accurate. It allows you to take a mental break from your ordinary routine. It's a lot of fun, and you meet a lot of great people. We connect on the waterways by responding to email invitations, posting on websites, and club announcements. Also, it's a great way to get an up-close view of nature. You can sneak up on wildlife. I've been right next to ducks, deer, and all kinds of birds. You just get a different view than you can get on land. I especially enjoy camping by canoe. It's like backpacking without having to carry a pack on your back. You can put everything you need in the hatches of the canoe. Have you experienced this kind of camping? Well, whatever you say about this sport, it's never dull. I think on one level, it's a serious activity and you can become a real champion, but it's a small group who take it that far. But for most, it's a fantastic sport for anyone who likes adventure.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 2. You will hear a man giving a talk about grass roofs on rooftops of buildings. First, you'll have some time to look at questions 11 to 13. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 13. And now it's straight into the Eco Hotspot for today's programme. We are in fact going to look at an intriguing trend in recent years in the world of eco-friendly developments. There has been a constant stream of new green products coming into the market for the environmentally conscious. A new departure which I feel needs greater attention drawn to it is the increasing interest in grass roofs. Environmentalists sing the praises of grass roofs as interest in sustainable ecological building has led to the greening of the rooftops of residential and commercial buildings around the world. And what does this type of roof consist of? Instead of tiles which allow water to run off and create flash flooding, the roof has a waterproof underlay which is laid over the roof deck. This waterproof layer is then covered with layers for insulation and drainage. Then on top of the insulation and drainage layer is added a final layer of soil or crushed stones for the plants and/or grass to grow on. The roof can be planted with wild flowers to add colour and life to your rooftop. Before you hear the rest of the talk, you'll have some time to look at questions 14 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 14 to 20. As for the benefits of grass roofs, in spring and in summer they are very pretty as flowers spring into bloom. Moreover, in summer grass roofs are of particular benefit in cities because they keep any building cool by reflecting the sun's rays. In winter, the grass roofs insulate the building, helping to prevent heat loss. The roofs require little maintenance and are better than any other roofing material. They encourage biodiversity by attracting bees and birds, and they absorb water runoff, which helps prevent flash flooding. In fact, the gravel layer retains 71% of rainwater that falls, thus helping to prevent flash flooding. In winter, the brown soil is a bit more evident, which can look unattractive if the roofs are not tended carefully, but that is a price worth paying, and I would say that they come highly recommended by those who have them. If you compare grass roofs with tiles, the latter do certainly look very tidy, but at a price to the future of the planet. The main drawbacks of tiles, though, are the water runoff and the absorption of heat from the sun's rays in summer. So, if we are to save the planet from the ecological point of view, tiles do not come recommended. The only roof that I can think of which has similar ecological credentials to the grass roof is the thatched roof. Thatched roofs are good insulators and very attractive, but very pricey and not ideal for cities. How can we make more of our roofs green? That is, how can people be persuaded to install grass roofs? The World Green Roof Conference in Australia was a very good start. At a grassroots level, the best way to raise the profile of grass roofs is to make them trendy by highlighting them in fashionable magazines so that people begin to feel that they cannot do without them. But the idea I like best is holding competitions for the best designed grass roofs. Next week, Eco Hotspot is going to look at... That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Section 2. You will hear an introduction to a camping trip. First, you'll have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen to the talk and answer questions 11 to 14. So, as you see, it's going to be quite an action-packed weekend. Well, that's all from me, so I'd now like to hand you over to Mary, who is going to tell you about the camping trip we've arranged for the coming week. Mary, it's over to you.
Thanks, Pete. Well, as Pete just mentioned, the camping trip has been organised for the coming week, which means that it will probably be quite chilly, especially at night, so I guess clothing would be a good place for me to start. Now, as I said, be prepared for some chilly starts. A good woolen sweater is an absolute must. Thermal underwear would also be a good investment, although I'm not suggesting you dash out and buy some. But if you do happen to have some knocking around, I'd certainly recommend taking them. You may also consider taking walking boots. They really do help to protect your feet from the undergrowth and offer good support for your ankles. In fact, sprained ankles are one of the most common injuries on trips such as this one. But if you don't have any, don't worry too much. A good, strong pair of shoes will do just as well. After all, we're not going rambling or potholing. But what I strongly suggest is that you buy some lightweight waterproof clothes. You know the sort of thing. They fold up very small and easily fit into your pocket. But do make sure they are both windproof and waterproof. This is very important because it can get very windy on the moors this time of year, and the chill factor can actually be very dangerous. People have even died from exposure simply because they weren't protected from the wind. So make sure you have those waterproofs with you.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you'll have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
Now for equipment. A torch would be handy, especially if you need to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. A small pocket-sized torch is ideal. You don't need anything that's too big. A pocket knife is always handy too, especially a multi-purpose knife. A Swiss Army knife is ideal. Now, this may sound strange, but take some plastic bags along too. They're ideal for putting over your shoes if the ground is wet, and they really do keep your feet warm and dry. That's about it for equipment. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, all the camping equipment will be provided, so you don't need to bring your own. In fact, the tents will be erected by the time we get there, so you won't have much work to do, which I'm sure will come as a welcome relief. We'll be camping on the edge of the forest, so with some luck we should see some wildlife. Deer, buck, badgers and hedgehogs are very active this time of year, so it's certainly worth taking your camera along. But I must insist that the animals' needs come first. Always remember that we'll be camping in their home, so we must respect both their privacy and their territory. So it's very important that A, you never, and I repeat, never leave discarded rubbish lying around, and B, that you keep the noise level to a minimum at all times, especially at night. I know that some of you are concerned about insects. After all, camping does seem to have an image of creepy crawlies, but let me reassure you now that insects are never disturbing. In fact, and this may come as a bit of a surprise, they are generally very shy creatures and prefer to keep well out of people's way. Anyway, we're running short of time, so I'll wrap up now. But what I'd like to say before we go and have lunch is that one of the greatest rewards of camping is to simply appreciate nature, to get away from the overcrowded cities and just enjoy the natural sights, sounds and smells of the countryside. Okay, so we can go for lunch now, but if there are any questions you'd like to ask, I'll be available all day. Just come along to my office.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Section 2. You will hear an announcement made by an official for the preparation plans for the town's 250th anniversary celebrations. First, you'll have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
And now for the preparation plans for the town's 250th anniversary celebrations. We are going to follow the same system we had last year, but with a few changes to increase the party spirit. First of all, this time we are going to make the concert on the beach open to everyone without charge. This is because we have been given money by the council for the celebration, and also because last year we had so many problems with keeping people out who had not paid. And on top of this, people will not have to pay for refreshments either, as these are being donated. Right now, we are going to divide into 4 teams. The first one, the beach team, will be responsible for cleaning up the beach on the Saturday morning, picking up litter, bottles, plastic bags, wood, and anything else that's lying around. Everyone is meeting at the beach shop at 8 a.m. It's an early start, but we want to give everywhere a good, thorough clean. We have had permission from the council to close the beach to get it ready for the anniversary celebration on Sunday. The second team will be responsible for setting out seating in the square for the speeches and prize giving. Again, an early start is preferable, but the vans with the seats can't be there until 9 a.m, so shall we say that everyone should meet at the village hall at 9:30? Starting then will allow extra time if the vans are late.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you will have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Now the third team will be the judges. For each of the various competitions we will have 3 judges. On the whole, they will have had experience of judging before. There will be a boat race, a swimming competition, and the best fancy dress. A cash prize will be given to the winner in each category, and for the 2 runners-up there will be book tokens. There is a sponsored mini-marathon, and by the deadline, lunchtime today, we had 263 applicants with ages ranging from 15 to 60. That's 80 more than last year. Each entrant has paid a £20 registration fee to enter, and all the profits will go to the local children's hospital to help fund much-needed specialist apparatus. The 4th team consists of the wardens for the day itself. We are expecting at least 10,000 people if last year is anything to go by. The fields near the entrance to the beach can be used as car parks, and we need wardens to help make sure the actual parking is more organised than last year, which was a mess. We also need someone to be in charge of the first aid, which will be at the entrance to the beach. Finally, we need some volunteers for the clean-up. Last year we didn't do this very well, and so the council has agreed to provide large bags to collect all the recyclable material like glass and plastic, etc. But we have to deal with the rest, like leftover food, ourselves. We don't want to leave piles of rotten food around or dangerous bottles.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.